I think you need to accept. So welcome to Watercolor for Beginners. This is an online class, and it will be a class that will be for 6 weeks. So I think I'm going to mute you guys. And if you have any questions, you can always unmute yourself. So tonight we will talk about the watercolor paper, and then after that I will move on to show you to show you a few techniques, and these techniques will be probably something very simple, such as a flat wash, a graded wash with one color, or a graded wash with two colors. And what is a graded wash used for? So this is a very simple little painting that I did. You can see the sky goes from very dark blue to very light blue. So this is considered a graded wash. So it's very useful in a watercolor painting to know how to do a graded wash. Another example of a graded wash, which we did in last class, is this. So if you do a graded wash that goes from very light blue to kind of like a purpley blue that is dark, and you put little lines across it, you create the water that you can see here in this example. See, it's like water. And the sky in this example is a flat wash. And then you have the little land here, little island. And I thought I had another example to show you guys. No, that's it. So watercolor paper, I have a little recording where I talk about the watercolor paper and how it's measured, that I will play. And then after that, you guys can ask your questions. Well, this is where my other example is. So this is another example of a painting. This is more complex, but you can see how I have in the background, the sky is like a graded wash. It goes from darker here to lighter blue. And here in the foreground, all the grass, I did a flat wash of a very light green. And then after that, I came back on top to add more of the darker green and darker yellowish here. So I'm going to share my screen now and play. It's only 4 minutes. It's the little recording about watercolor paper. Can you see the screen? If someone could unmute and say yes, that I would agree. I would appreciate.
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So I'm going to play this.
Claire, I can't hear the volume on the recording.
Neither can I.
Nope.
No, I can't hear it.
Okay. So you cannot hear the recording. Okay. So for this class, you were asked to get some paper for the class, which is, I said, 140-pound minimum. And so if you bought something like this, for example, this is 140 pounds, is right here. And this is Archers. Archers is this is a very good brand for watercolor paper. And in this case, this comes in as a block. So when you open it up, you can see the paper is glued on all sides. This glue is black. So it's glued on all sides. and even here, except there's a little opening here. So when you buy the paper in a block like this, then you don't have to tape it all around because it's already glued all around. All you have to do is paint on it. Then when you're done your painting, then you can insert a little something very small, like a knife or maybe your nail, and you can remove one sheet, the sheet that you painted on, that you can just unglue. It's actually coming unglued right now, this one on the side. So this is one example. You could also buy, like for example, at Michael's, not that I have any shares in Michael's, but if you buy the students grade watercolor paper, they have 140-pound paper. That's also very good. It's sufficient for this class. Now you could also buy 300-pound paper. That will be a thicker paper, and it will come in various size. So if you want to buy 300-pound paper, which is a lot thicker, that is sold in sheets. In one sheet of watercolor paper, 300-pound, will be sold for, the size will be 22 inches by 30 inches. Let me just make sure that I'm saying the right thing. Yes. So it will be 22 by 30. And it will be, if it's 300-pound. So when you want to paint on it, you can cut it to the size that you want. So what is the advantage of buying 300-pound paper? Well, it can take more water. It won't go like this when you put water on the 300-pound paper. But I also wanted to ask you, do you know how they measure the 140-pound? Because if I have one sheet of watercolor paper like this, it doesn't actually weigh 140 pounds. But this sheet of paper, of watercolor paper, is qualified to be a 140-pound paper. So do you know how it's measured?
No, I don't.
Okay, so I did a little research to be able to tell you. So the way that it's measured is they use a sheet of watercolor paper. So the standard size for a sheet of watercolor paper is 22 inches by 30 inches. So if they take a sheet of watercolor paper that is the 140 pounds, so they will take one sheet and they will pile it up with a whole bunch of sheets. They will pile up 500 of these sheets, 22 inches by 30 inches. And this will weigh approximately 140 pounds. Or if it's the 300-pound paper, if they take 500 sheets of 22 by 30, 300-pound paper, and they weigh it, it will weigh approximately 300 pounds. I should say pounds, right? With an S. So is there any questions about the paper, the watercolor paper? No. Okay. So now comes the fun, because we're going to do a little exercise. In preparation to do our exercise, if you have bought a block of watercolor paper, you don't have to do this. But if you have not bought a block of watercolor paper, you have bought the Michael's watercolor paper like this. This is what I have. Like a little tablet like this. So what I do is I take it off of this and I tape it all around on the surface. So I tape it like this all the way around. If you don't have, this is a piece of masonite, but if you don't have a piece of masonite like this, you can simply open this. Now, here is your watercolor paper right here. And you can tape it like all the way on the side like this. And then on the bottom and on this side, and here it's glued. Doing this will prevent the water from running below the surface of the water of the paper. And also it will help keep the paper flat when you're painting on it with the water and when you're putting water on it. So if you have tape, that would be a good idea to prepare your paper like this. Oh, and Cheryl, you raised your hand. Yes.
Mine came in single sheets.
Oh.
So do I just tape around the edges?
Yeah. If it came in single sheets, you can tape it to like maybe a cardboard that you have or your table. Or if you don't have anything to tape it on, then just leave it and just paint on it as it is.
Okay.
What I'd like us to do is I'd like us to separate the sheet in 4, like this. So put a tape like across horizontally and vertically. So horizontally and vertically. And then we will paint in each of these rectangle one at a time. So I will give you a few minutes to do this. So we are going to practice how to do a flat wash and how to do a graded wash on each of these little surfaces. And once we have done these exercises, then we will attempt to do the sphere. The sphere is like an example of a green apple, of an example of like a peach, but if it were completely yellow, or maybe a lemon, although it's a little too round. But that's what we'll do. So to be able to do this, we need to be able to do a flat wash. See, in this section, you can see it's all the same yellow. In here, we also have kind of like a graded wash. It's got some lighter color and some darker color. And then we have all these other colors that are kind of like graded from a teal color to a green color down here. So before we dive into this, we are going to practice the flat wash and the graded wash. And the first thing that we have to do is to make sure that we have sufficient color or pigment mixed with water before we start painting the surface. And to do this, if you have a paint tube like this, for example, this is what I have, and this paint, it comes in a tube and I can just squeeze it out. So what you have to do is you have to squeeze out some of the paint and then mix it with water prior to starting. So I'm going to do an example of that. And then after I've done my example, then I will give you a little bit of time to prepare your color. So I'm going to take the alizarin crimson to do this. You can use any color that you want for this. So I just squeezed some paint like this on the side of the well. If you don't have a little plastic thing like this with wells, maybe you have a large plastic container where you can mix your colors. You can do it there too. Or a large plastic palette, you can do it there too. And if you have bought paints that are in little panes, that are like little hard paints, then you can't squeeze it out like this, but you can wet your brush into the water and mix it on top of the pane until you have sufficient to paint a small surface. So how do I prepare my paint? Once I have squeezed out the color, like in this example here, then I dip a small brush into the water and I start wetting my color like this on the side, and it will take more water, so I get more water. You can do this with a larger brush, but what happens is the pigment will then go into your brush and you might lose a lot of pigment by doing so. So this is how I'm preparing my red to do a flat wash with the red. So because it's a small brush, it only brings a little bit of water each time. But eventually I will have wet all of my color. So once my color is ready, then I could do my flat wash. But I will give you a little bit of time to prepare your color. Just use the color that you want and prepare your color. Then after it's ready, let me know. And then I will do a demonstration on how to do a flat wash using the color that we just prepared. So now I'm trying to remove the pigment that I have on my brush so it stays in my little well. And when I put my brush in the water every time, I don't shake it there. I just grab the water from my little bowl. All right, now my red is ready. So this is another little type of paint container that you can buy. This is a Winsor Newton, and it comes in these little panes. So we've got different colors here, and if I want to prepare color to do my flat wash, then I have to wet the color and mix it into a surface like this so that it's ready for my graded wash. So let's say I do this with the blue. So I have, let's see, I'll do it with this kind of like it's a red orange. I think it's Canyon medium. It's red Canyon light. So what I do is I put my brush into the water. I'll go like this. This will be better. So you'll be able to see. So I put my brush into the water, the same little brush, and then I wet this. Then you can see that I'm getting some. So I put it in the water again and I wet it. And then I'm starting to get a little bit more of the paint. So I prepare it into this little thing here that is in the cover of my case. So even if you have the little guys like this, you need some kind of a plastic palette where you can prepare your color like this. And eventually you get used to doing this. I recommend using a small brush so that the color doesn't go all into, the pigment doesn't go all into your brush and then you lose the pigment. It might take a little longer to prepare color that isn't a paint like this, but when you're traveling, having a little paint case like this is very, very, very convenient. So that's how I do this. And eventually I'll have enough to do my area. That's probably almost enough. There. So I have prepared all of this, and that should be enough for the area that we're going to do, like a small area like this. So my paint is ready. It's the alizarin crimson that I prepared here in this little well. I made sure I have enough to cover the whole surface that I want to paint, which is this surface. Before I start painting, and I will demonstrate first, and then I will give you time to try it. So I use a bowl of clear water. If you don't have a bowl of clear water, you can use the bowl of water where you have dipped your brush to prepare a color. It will still work fine. And I'm gonna wet my my surface. Now, so that I can show on the camera, my surface is completely vertical. What I recommend that you do is that you put your surface at an angle, maybe like so. So there is a little bit of an angle, but it's not completely flat and it's not completely vertical. It's a lot harder to do it vertically. And if you need to prop your paper, you just can put a little something. Sometimes I'll just turn this little container upside down and that'll be my prop. So once I have wet my paper and I've let it dry a little bit, then I completely dip my brush, my big brush, into the red, the little well of red, and therefore my brush becomes saturated. I'm trying to show you to the camera. It doesn't show. Now it shows. So you can see that there's a lot of red on this brush. And with this, I'll be able to do my flat wash by going like this from side to side. Okay. There we go. Once it's done, then I leave it. I let it dry and I'm going to put it flat so it dries flat. And while this is drying, I will give you time to try it. So I'm wetting this completely with a clean brush. And now with my same brush that I used before, I'm going to dip it into my paint again. And I'm going to do a nice graded wash. Starting here like this. Oh, need more pigment. There. So this will be a little bit better. Ooh. Yeah, I need to let it dry. Flat. And this time I'm going to demonstrate on here how to do a graded wash. And so because I'm changing colors, I'm gonna clean my brush. I had a lot of red on there. And I'm just changing color just because there's no real reason, but I'm going to do blue. You can do either blue or you can do yellow or you can do another red. I mean, or if you have another color that you like to use, so you can use that color. It doesn't matter. It's just for fun. So to do a graded wash, you wet well, first you have to have your color ready. Then you wet the paper. And once the paper is wet, you let it dry a little bit. And I'm just going to dry under. So you let it dry a little bit. Ooh, gotta make sure that it's wet all the way to the bottom. And when doing a graded wash, you want to have more pigment at the top than at the bottom, or the reverse. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to dip into my blue. I'm going to do blue. So I'm going to dip into my blue. Now I have quite a bit of pigment on my brush, and I'm going to go from the bottom up to do this flat wash, this graded wash. And as I go up, there's less and less and less and less pigment onto my brush. And it gives me something like this. Now, if I turn it upside down, I think I have an interesting so you can see it's from dark to light, and I'm going to put it flat so that it dries the way that I painted it, because gravity tends to keep modifying what I paint. So now one thing that I also want to show you is the fact that the paint accumulates here at the bottom. So with a brush, I can dry the brush on my paper towel, and I'll just come here and capture this with my brush. Now this here is on the tape. You can just dry it with my paper towel, but this here, what accumulates on the paper, I can remove with my brush. I want to put this flat so that it dries and it keeps. So if I turn it upside down, it looks like a nice sky. So if you have done your third, now you're doing your fourth. If you have followed the teacher, then you're doing your third. So for the fourth one, you can see here, actually, that's a good example. See here, there was too much water. And because there was too much water, the pigment did not stick. It just got pushed away. But there's a nice gradation here from dark to light. So if I were to turn it upside down, this could be a nice sky. This. Now, one thing that you said, Kathy, that is something I want to touch on is when you wet your paper, before you start painting on it, it's a good idea to let it dry a little bit until it becomes almost matte. Then that means that it's the right amount of wetness for it to accept the pigment and not push it away. So let's try this. And this time, I invite you guys to start. So I saw someone, and I can't remember who it is. I think it was maybe Linda or maybe Mary. But I invite you guys to start with one color and mix into another color. And so if you have some blue and some yellow, that's what I'm going to demonstrate with. So I'm going to start with some yellow at the top, and then eventually I will mix, transition into the blue. So it will give me a graded wash with two colors. And the end result would look like something like this. So in this one, I had cerulean blue that I started with, and then I transitioned into the yellow, and here it's pure yellow. And in this example, I went from lime green and I transitioned my lime green into magenta, and that's what gives me the nice orange in between, because the mix between the lime green and the magenta gives me a nice orange. But it's a nice graded wash that goes from lime green into the mid-tone and then into magenta. So these are examples. And in this case, I'm simply going to go from yellow to blue. And the first thing that I'm going to do is wet my paper. And this time I'm going to make sure that my paper has dried sufficiently to be matte before I start putting the pigment on it. And I'm also trying to make sure that the whole surface is wet. So now it's still shiny and it's still running, and I need to let it dry. But I'm going to paint with my blue and my yellow. And the blue that I use is ultramarine blue or French ultramarine. And the yellow that I use is Canyon Yellow Medium. But if you have another type of yellow, that could work too. Now I'm going to look at my surface, and it's starting to get a little matte. And so therefore I'm going to paint with this
Claire,
time. Yes.
does it matter which color you start with?
No.
Okay.
No. This is your chance to experiment. And so try the colors that you want. So I'm going to use my filbert brush this time. I'm going to start with my yellow. So I dip my brush into the yellow. I want to make sure that I have enough liquid. So I'm starting with my yellow and I'm coming down with the yellow, but I make sure that I don't go all the way to the bottom, because otherwise at the bottom, I won't have the nice bright blue that I want. So now I put the yellow here. And I'm going to clean my brush, make sure I wipe it on the paper towel to make sure that I've removed all of the yellow. Okay, that's good. Now I'm going to dip it into some clear water and into my blue. And I'm going to start at the bottom with the blue. So start at the bottom with the blue, and I'm going to go back up with my blue. And as I'm going back up, more pigment. That's when I will get to a point where the two colors will mix. Give me some green. I don't want to go all the way to the top. So I've removed some pigment. Now what I need to do, I think, is go back into my yellow. So I am clean. I clean my brush, dip into my yellow again. And I'm just going to go here to do the transition better. There. So now I have a graded wash that goes from yellow into green into blue. All right, so to paint the sphere, we will be using yellow, lime green, which we see here or here. And we will also be using green, and this is turquoise or teal. So if I show you the color wheel, then it's these four colors are four colors that are contiguous on the color wheel. So we have the yellow here, which is the primary color, and the blue here, which is another primary color. All the colors in between the yellow and the blue are made of a mix of the yellow and the blue. And the one that, you know, that's most common is the green. So that's yellow and blue. The lime green will be more yellow than blue. And then the teal is more blue than yellow because it's closer to the blue. So to paint this, I suggest that we use the yellow, lime green, green, and turquoise. Not the blue just by itself. It'll be these four colors, which is analogous colors because they're contiguous on the color wheel. And so therefore, before starting to paint this, and I'm going to do it on a full sheet, you can decide if you want to do it on the full sheet or a quarter sheet or like a smaller area of a sheet. Depending on how you are doing with your paint. You know, if you cannot prepare enough paint, then it might be difficult to do this. But to start, before I start painting this, I'm going to prepare all my colors. So I painted this before, so that's why I have all these colors prepared. But basically I have my Canyon yellow medium, and using a little bit of ultramarine blue into my yellow, I prepared my lime green, a little bit more blue into the yellow, I prepared my green, and then this is my teal. Basically, I did a little test strip to show you. Now I can't find it. Ah, here it is. Basically, you can see here, this is the yellow, the lime green, the green, and the teal color. So preparing these colors, once they are ready, having a little, this is just a little piece of watercolor paper that I cut out in little pieces. And I like to try it on a little piece of paper, let it dry to really see if these are the colors that I want. If these are not the colors that I want, I can still change them before I paint my subject matter. In this case, it's just an exercise, so it's not so important, but sometimes you really want to get a specific color for an object, and so therefore it's good to do this practice. So before we start, then we need to prepare the colors, and since we only have 12 minutes left in this class, I'm going to go ahead, finish preparing my colors quick, and I'm going to do the demonstration. Now, if you want to follow at the same time, you can, or you can decide if you want to just watch the recording after the class to try it after the class. So it's up to you. Now I'm going to finish preparing my colors. Is there? Oh, the sphere. So to do the sphere, you can do a circle. Let's say you can use something like this to draw your circle, or a plate, or another, or a bowl, or something. But I find that I can just paint it, because I'm just doing a sphere. I'm not doing anything specific, and it's an exercise. So I like to just go for it. First, I have prepared my colors. So I have my yellow, lime green, green, and teal. And these are the colors that it gives me. You can see yellow, lime green, green, and teal. And we're trying to do something like this. So I'm going to wet the sphere, the middle part, into a circle. I'm using my big brush because I find it very convenient. I find that it goes really well to do this. My big flat brush. And once it is all wet, then I'm going to dip my brush into my yellow. And I'm going to paint the whole sphere yellow. There. Then, if I suppose that the light is coming from this direction and hitting my sphere, then this portion of the sphere will be in the shadow. And so therefore, I want to work some darker color into this section. So this is my lime green that I've used. And I'm putting some lime green on this side that is in the shadow. Make sure that it's a smooth transition. So I'm adding a little bit more of my yellow. And I'm also going to add a little bit of green in this area. Not the whole area, but more like on the side. There, this is good. Because I'm painting wet on wet, it gives me some nice transitions. Right. So now I have my sphere. I've painted my sphere. And this time I'm going to paint the background. And I have to be careful because I don't want it to drip like it did the last time. So wetting the background up to about like it'll be the 2/3 up. I'm not touching the sphere, just paint. I'm just wetting the background without touching the sphere because the sphere is still wet. Normally I would let it completely dry, but I want to make sure that I complete this demonstration before the end of class. All right, so now this is all wet. And I'm going to start with a nice turquoise or teal background. So I'm dipping into my teal. I need a little bit more water. Dipping into my teal to start on this side with the nice teal color. Make sure that I go all the way to my sphere. With this beautiful color.
That's the top, right? You turn it upside down?
Exactly, yes. I did
Okay.
turn it upside down. Now making sure that I'm touching the sphere. I don't want to leave space. Bent. All right, and now transitioning into the grain. And because the teal is still wet, gives me a nice transition. Green, more of the green. So this nice dark green and maybe a little teal will be nice close to the sphere to highlight it. And then as I'm pushing away from the sphere, I can transition into the lime green. I turn it upside up. So my background is done. And now I'm ready to do my table. So I'm going to wet my table. Ah, this happened again. No! I should have dried. I should have dried this. I forgot again. All right, so this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to dry this. I'm going to show you how this can be fixed. So I'm putting it upside down again, and I'm going to paint some more on it. So when it's still wet, if you paint some more on it, then you can kind of make this go away. But then you got to make sure you cover the whole thing, because if you don't repaint the whole thing, then it's going to show that you stopped. You only repainted one section. Okay, so now I've repainted it. And before I turn it upside down, I'm going to dry this tape. It's giving me a hard time. This is happening because I'm painting vertically. You're not painting vertically, you can easily do these, you know, turn it upside down, turn it back, you know, and then turn it back the way that it's supposed to be. Okay, so because now I have dried the tape, it will not happen again. Whew. Shoo. Now, table, I'm gonna do my table. And so I'm wetting my table. All the way to the wall, right here where the table meets the wall. Making sure that I'm covering that all the way to my sphere. I'm still just using just water, not too much. Okay, so now this water is pretty much dried up, and I want to do, I think I'm going to do a yellow table. There we go. And a table usually gets lighter in the back when it goes away from you, from the viewer, and darker in the front. So I'm going to do a little lime green here in the front at the bottom while the yellow is still wet, but just to make it a little darker in the front. And I'm going to create the shadow. Shadow will be like so. Doing the shadow while the table is still wet will give me a nice soft edge. Like this. And then I will just dip into my green to make it a little darker, closer to the object. Next time you look at a ball or something that's on a table, you'll see the shadows rarely completely equal. So now we have the sphere, and I need to put it dry, let it dry flat because this is running down